Hi there, my name is Caitlin Bandy and this is my channel BandysBooks, and today I am here with a new segment for my channel called Rant or Review. It's going to be popping up every Friday and it's going to be an opportunity for me to dive a little deeper into a book that I've recently read. So my idea for this is that sometimes there'll be positive reviews where I really loved a book and I want to just exclaim from the rooftops how much you should read it. And sometimes there are going to be rants where I didn't like a book or I felt strongly about a book and I have a lot to say. But this first one that we're kicking off is kind of interesting because I actually don't really feel strongly about liking it or disliking it. I'm kind of neutral in terms of my feelings towards it, but I have a lot to say about the themes and some of the things that happen in the book. It's just a really interesting book by a very interesting author, and so I thought this would be a great book to kick this off. And if you haven't met my little girl Luna here, she's the newest member of our family. We adopted her a couple months ago, so she may wander in and out of the video here. She's not really so far trained yet to like sit for long periods of time, so she kind of just pops in, sits in my lap here and says hi, and then she may wander off and come back in. So we're going to be jumping into a review of You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi. If you haven't read books by Akwaeke Emezi before, I highly recommend them. They are a Nigerian author and they write a whole variety of genres. In fact, every time they write a book, it seems like it's from a different genre. They've done poetry, memoir, romance, contemporary fiction, like a whole variety. And they have such a unique perspective on life. All of their books are so unique. So definitely would recommend. They wrote The Death of Vivek Oji, which is an awesome but heartbreaking book. Highly recommend reading that one in particular if you wanted to get a taste of their writing. Sorry, Luna's now got the zoomies and her favorite toy lamb chop here. So you may see her going back and forth. So this book, You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. I buddy read this with my friend Allie over on Bookstagram. Check her out. I'll make sure I link her Bookstagram account below. She's lovely. She reads a lot of diverse books, and she and I actually have buddy read a couple different books by Akwaeke Emezi now. I think this was the third one. We did Vivek Oji, and then their memoir, Dear Santhurin, and then we picked up this one. So this book is about a 29-year-old named Faye Adekola. So when the story starts, Faye is recovering from the trauma that she suffered when her and her husband were in a car accident. Her husband dies and she survives, but she's very physically and emotionally scarred by this accident. As the story starts, she hasn't had any sort of relationship or any physical relationship even with anyone for 5 years. She's been celibate. She hasn't even considered a romance. She's just kind of been numb to everything. We meet her when she is trying to change that. She no longer wants to be celibate and alone forever. She's at a rooftop party in Bushwick where she meets a guy named Milan, and they have a pretty hot, steamy hookup in the bathroom at this party. Milan is a complete stranger, and this is totally out of her normal. And I will say it gets pretty explicit pretty fast. So if you're not into an explicit sex scene right in the beginning of the book, then definitely be warned that that does pop up. So Faye and Milan, after this hookup, begin to kind of casually date each other. They're not really seriously dating. There's no exclusivity. There's no depth to the relationship. They're not talking about their feelings. Faye's not unpacking her damage or anything like that. And it seems like what she needs at that time. She kind of is just looking to kind of get back on the saddle, and that's basically what she does. But when she meets a group of Milan's friends at a concert, she meets this guy named Nasir, and Nasir is instantly drawn to Faye. He thinks she's beautiful and intelligent, and he's really drawn to her artsy nature and everything, and he just wants to get to know her. But Faye's not in a place where she's looking for emotional depth and understanding, and she's really shy with Nasir. Nasir tries to date her initially, and she makes it clear she's just not in a place to be dated. She wants to just kind of take it slow. And by take it slow, she means glacial. She wants to just be friends, basically. And I feel like that could be communicated a little more clearly. I don't think it's ever really told to Nasir straight up, hey, I'm not interested in dating you. It kind of is just clear by Faye's actions. But Nasir is hopeful, and he does a lot of really sweet things. He's very gentlemanly. He takes her out. He puts no pressure on her at all to date him. And eventually he puts her in touch. She's an artist, and he puts her in touch with a very, very well-known art curator. and helps her set up her own show, which is pretty exciting. And then on the back of that success, Nasir offers to take Faye home to the island that he grew up on in the Caribbean. Oh, hello. Hello. So they go to the Caribbean, and Faye is just enamored right away. Like, you can tell. And you can tell how much Emezi really enjoys the Caribbean as well, because the description is just stunning. You could just imagine yourself in the environment. That was something that I really loved about this book. It really, really anchored me in the location once we get to the Caribbean. I mean, the description of New York was pretty good too, and fairly accurate. Like, I've been a couple times and I felt like they got the vibe right, but the Caribbean is where the story really starts to show in terms of the setting. The story really sets off once they land in the Caribbean. Faye is taken home to Nasir's childhood home, where she meets his father, Aleem. Aleem is a world-renowned chef. Everybody is just gaga for him. His food is amazing. Like, even as a chef reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy sounds amazing. Like, yeah, I love the food inclusion, the food description, the chef that seems like a real chef, not just like what somebody thinks a chef is like. And Faye and Aleem, the father, slowly start to notice that they have a lot of similarities. So all of this is pretty generic up to this point. So going further into the story now, I'm going to start getting into spoiler territory. So if you do not want to spoil this book for yourself, like if you're planning to read it or you have any interest in not knowing what it is at this point, this would be the point to turn off the video, because the next few sentences are going to spoil the ending. Okay, so now that all the spoiler people are gone, so Faye and Aleem, the father, begin a relationship. They both are widowers, and they both are struggling with their grief and finding relationships that are meaningful post-grief. And they find that there's a lot of comfort they can offer each other, having had similar experiences, having both lost someone they love, having deep and isolating thoughts that, you know, the average person doesn't experience. So that connection just really pulls them together, and it seems that they can't resist each other, even though you know it's going to cause problems, right? Nasir is mad for Faye, and you know that if she starts dating his dad, that there's going to be trouble. And both Aleem and Faye are aware of that, but it just feels inevitable. It feels like they can't control it. There's nothing that they can do to prevent themselves from falling in love with each other. And so, of course, they fall in love, they start sleeping together. Nasir finds out in a way that's not cool. It's not based on communication and respect. He finds out in basically the worst way possible, and things implode from there. His relationship with his father is threatened. He's really angry with Faye. Faye doesn't understand why he's so angry. Like, there's just a lot going on in this story, right? And I feel like the themes that come up are what gets most interesting. Like, the story itself, I felt kind of like about. I think the relationship with the dad was a little icky to me, not because necessarily of the age or because, you know, I felt like the relationship wasn't right. I did actually think that they had things in common that made sense from a relationship standpoint. I just knew that it was really gonna cause a lot of turmoil within this family, and that's the part that I didn't like. So I guess this is the first part to start with. One theme that I felt like was maybe a part of this book was communication, and why communication is so important. So Nasir, I mean, he's gonna find out about Faye and his dad Aleem at some point, and the best way to find out would be either from Faye or his father, or both. You know, sit down and go, hey, I know this is gonna be really difficult. We have bad news or good news, or however you wanna portray it, but like to just be honest and communicate it with him. And instead he finds out by accident about Faye sleeping with his dad, and you know, it just goes catastrophic from there. So that's one instance where like communication might have done a little bit of damage control. The communication should have started a lot earlier in the story. When Faye and Nasir start hanging out, like I said, Nasir is really, really into Faye, but she's clearly not that into him. Like, she likes him as a person, but not in the way that, you know, indicates that she wants a relationship with him, that she wants a romance with him. And I don't know that she's ever really that clear with him. And I think that she could have really avoided wasting his time and hurting his feelings had she just been upfront in the beginning and said, hey, there's no chance that we're ever going to be in a relationship together. And I think that would have just solved a lot of the problems. Of course, then she wouldn't have been brought home with him, and she wouldn't have met his father Aleem and fallen in love with him. So I mean, obviously it's a mechanism for the story, but I felt like that was kind of a critique of communication issues and like why communication is so important throughout the book. The second thing that I found maybe as a societal critique was that Nasir is like the nice guy, right? Throughout the story, he's super nice to Faye. He does everything right. He takes her out to dinner. He puts no pressure on her for kisses or romance or sex or relationship or commitment or anything. He sets her up with an art curator. He flies her home to the Caribbean. He does all this stuff that's really, really nice. And then when she starts dating his dad, there's this confrontation between she and him, between her, Faye and Nasir. And during that conversation, Nasir's throwing a lot of stuff in her face, and it kind of comes across like, I'm a nice guy, how come you don't want to date me? I did nice things for you, so you owe me sex in return. Though Nasir walks some of that back and makes it clear that that's not really his expectation at the end of the day, it did feel like there was some critique in the book of that nice guy trope where it's like, I'm nice, you owe me sex. And while it didn't go full blown, I definitely could see some elements of that. Then the third thing, which permeates the entire story, is the topic of grief. Grief is messy and ugly. There's no path straight through grief that just like allows one to like set a specific time and just get through it and be over it. In this case, Faye's grief is complicated. She goes through periods of time where she's numb, she doesn't want anyone. Then she goes into risky sex at parties with a random stranger. And then she kind of dates somebody that she doesn't really want to be with because she's not sure she wants to be alone, before she ends up with this much older man in a situation that's pretty questionable as well. It's not clear at the end of the story whether this is going to be a happily ever after or a happily for now sort of a situation, but what is clear is that Faye and her grief are going in all sorts of directions, and that she's still figuring out what she needs. She's not even really sure herself. And maybe Aleem isn't all the way sure either. They just know that they find some solace in their connection. And it's not a perfect love story. It's not a happy ending. It's not an uplifting romance. I know that this is titled or categorized as being in the romance genre, but for me, it didn't have the feeling of a romance. It had the feeling of a very complex, deep, introspective look at what grieving means and what grief is like, and not so much like a love story that inspires you and makes you feel all fluffy and fuzzy inside. Like I said, every time I've picked up a book by Emezi, I am left with complex feelings. I don't find them straightforward. I find their writing to be very thought-provoking and emotional, and never ever straightforward. And maybe that's why they write grief so well. Maybe because they understand that nothing is straightforward and just direct. Definitely, if you want a book that's gonna make you think about what you would do if you suffered an extreme loss, make you think about the complexity of grief, and really analyze the depths of two lonely souls meeting each other. This is an interesting book to pick up. I can't say that I loved it, and I can't say that I hated it. For me, it was probably like a 3.5 star. It was definitely not as moving as The Death of Vivek Oji, but it wasn't not moving or not emotional overall. Just, again, a really interesting book and a really different direction from the previous books by this author. So that's really all I have to say about this one for now. I hope that you'll pick it up and check it out for yourself. I hope that this video was interesting to you. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up. Maybe comment down below. Let me know if you've read it, what you thought. And if you haven't read it, do you think you might read it? And otherwise, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button down below, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.